Everyone.
Hello to everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, guys.
At
I
the
think,
outset, sorry, does someone want to say something before we start?
no, please go ahead.
Right. At the outset, I must say that, the organizers have chosen a very interesting but broad topic. India in 2030 can be further split into 25 topics for 25 panels to discuss, and still there'll be a lot of things left to say. However, given the limited time we have, we shall take a stab at some of the biggest issues, I think. So we are in interesting times, if I may use the word, and the pandemic is a crisis that also offers an opportunity. Although international agencies, such as IMF and OECD, have estimated that India will suffer the deepest economic scarring from the pandemic, they also, for the most part, paint an optimistic future a decade ahead because of the size of the economy, because of the young population like our audience, high savings, potential productivity gains, and so on and so forth. Some say that a $10 trillion economy in another 12 to 13 years, if not in 10 years, is inevitable. Is it inevitable or is it optimistic? What are the building blocks, for India in 2030? Let's kick the debate open with Mr. Deepak Bagla.
Thank you, Ravi, and good afternoon to everyone. It's a post-lunch session on a Saturday afternoon, and still we are all here, so it shows how important SRCC is for us. And I do recollect you had the best butter chicken on a Wednesday night, I remember during my college days, so we used to try and make ourselves to your hostel to get that. But coming back to the point. So let's, first let me give you a quick introduction on Invest India so you know the perspective which I'm coming in from. We are the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency. We are the first point of contact for any investor, global or local, who's wanting to put up an entity in India. It's actually the only platform in the country where all the state governments and the central government together are co-holders of this platform. So in the first, we have sector specialists, state specialists, country specialists, and the FDI policy, some of the new industrial policies like the PLIs, etc. The strawman, etc. gets created there. The second vertical is of Invest India is Startup India. So, it was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister in January 2016. We are the execution arm for Startup India. The third vertical is the accelerated growth of new India investment, innovation. So that is under the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, the PMSTAC program, the scientific program. And that vertical, the execution of that entire element is within Invest India. Typically, that means interesting things like taking innovation to commercialization or on a fast track basis of R&D centers being opened in India. And as you know, India has now become the #1 global R&D destination in the past 50 odd months. And the last element is obviously where we work with the state governments to upgrade that entire effort of bringing in investments and seeing how we do the industrial ecosystem. So very quickly, before we went into this virus, so let's go back to 2020 March. What was our position? We had received $74 billion in FDI, which was the highest ever FDI we've received in our history. Look at the three strong reasons why that happened. We were the largest market opportunity on the planet in the free world. I think even after the COVID, we continue staying that. The reason I say that is we are about 1.2, 1.3 billion today. By 2025, 26 will be 1.5 billion, single larger customer base and an open customer base. Second is we were the fastest growing large economy. Please don't forget in the past 60 months, we moved from number 10 to number 5, Russia, Italy, Brazil, France, UK, big industrial giants, you moved ahead of them. 1.3 billion, trillion is where you, close to that is where you are today. And please remember, the other interesting element on that is that the first trillion you made was 2007, 2008. Took you 70 years to get there, 60 years. The second you made in 2015, which is just 7 to 8 years. The third you did in 2020, 5 years. So that number is decreased. So you were the largest single opportunity, you were the fastest growing, and you were the youngest, average age 29. You'll be the youngest on the planet, at least for the next 100 years as an economy. And I think those three were very strong reasons why we were seeing this huge number of investments coming into India, and especially even on the FDI side. Let's see what happened to us during the COVID. during this virus. Few numbers again. In the first 10 months of the virus itself, I've got $67.5 billion. Again, it's the highest ever we've got in our history. Now, let me tell you some more interesting factors on that one. Remember that 74 billion I spoke to you about? 92% of that came in the automatic route. There were no specific approvals required for a foreign investor to come into India on that one. We remain the most open economy on the planet, with the private sector having the ability to play a role in each and every sector of my economy. Why are all these investments coming in? One is there is a huge movement of onshoring and shortening of global supply chains. Today, we launched in July, the team was actively involved on the production-linked incentives for, let's say, the electronics industry, especially your mobile phones. Each and every large major of the world is now in India, manufacturing in India. All that during this lockdown itself. So that is the first thing which has come in. The second is, to my mind, we are at the most critical inflection point in the history of modern India. This decade, you will see an unprecedented transformation, both in terms of scale and the pace at which it is moving. I gave you an idea on the scale. Let me give you an idea on the pace. 48 months ago, and let's all agree on the point that data is the new oil, to a large extent. On data itself, 48 months ago, your global position on per capita data consumption, I'm not even talking of total data consumption, I'm talking of per capita data consumption, was 122, 123. Guess where it was earlier this year or late last year? You were number one in the world. That is the pace at which India is changing. And let me give you another instance how it is impacting. Sorry, Ravi, I know I have to shut up because I just go on and on about it, but let me leave you with the last point on how it brings in that impact. The first time in human economic history, a brand new company gets 100 million new customers in 180 days, and that too at a cost of acquisition which is less than half of the global average. I've just taken you through a huge spectrum of what the opportunity is, how the world is looking at that opportunity, and how it is now becoming easier to access that opportunity. And you put in all these three together, it brings you to a point where India is at its one of most critical inflection points. Into my mind, this decade is the decade where you see that inflection point turning around the hockey stick to a vertical. Back to you, Ravi. Thank you, and sorry for being so long.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bagla. You have presented very interesting facts, and these are facts, so these are undisputable. But Mr. Dhaiya, do you think that Mr. Bagla has cherry-picked these facts? As an entrepreneur who is running a business on the ground and who is likely to float an IPO very soon, what do you think? I mean, is there enough support from the policymakers when it comes to actually, conducting a business on the ground? Have you become a nearly $4 billion company with government help or despite government help?
Ravi, it doesn't matter, quite honestly. The biggest help the government has done is largely stepping out of the way, right? And because India is a huge economy, huge, massive economy, our population and our people's entrepreneurship zeal is unmatched anywhere in the world. Just the number of SMEs in this country is unmatched by any country in the world. As a economy at ours, you just look at the number of Indians who do so well, both within and outside India. The quality of our manpower is unmatched. I think it is sad that over the last 50, 60, 70 years, we somehow got held back, which is why you had Indians doing very well abroad, but not within India. But that has changed. And we can see that change by almost a reverse brain drain starting to happen. This was not a thing of the past. You never had people from the Silicon Valley coming back to India to set up businesses. But you are seeing that happen, right? And you are seeing that happen more and more. The number of unicorns out there. See, these unicorns are part of the disruptive economy that's going to as they say, right, the entrepreneurs will build the future, and that's obvious with the pace of change in the world, not just in India. You need entrepreneurial operations to change industries very fast, and they will drive that change. And you need very high quality people to drive that entire change from a technology perspective, from an understanding of problems perspective, from a management perspective. And the good news is that talent exists in India, and it's almost all homegrown, right? That we are, if you look at most of the unicorns, they're almost all homegrown. And the capital, what the government has enabled is the capital being able to come into those organizations. Please understand, the government could very easily have made that a very difficult process. And I think what Deepak sir spoke about, the automatic processes. If I take my own industry, today we have an automatic route in my own business from an investment perspective that did not exist earlier. And I think all of those pieces help us. Uh, you know, there will always be a, a fair amount of dynamism, or let's say conflict, I would say, between regulations and what I would call transformation. Because a regulation is always built looking at the past. And while it tries to stay in touch with the future, it's always difficult.
So
Because
do you
most
find
of
the
the
regulators more responsive now?
Definitely, without a shadow of doubt. But what I'm trying to say is it's very difficult for a regulator to be future looking. Simply because, especially when a country like India is for the first time creating the future, right? The future doesn't exist anywhere else. You can't look at America, or you can't look at the UK, or you can't look at Europe and say, okay, that is the future, so we are headed in that direction. Many of these companies are creating future here for the first time. Like I can very proudly say our own organization is the most advanced insurance distributor anywhere in the world. Nobody matches it in terms of its sophistication. So it's very difficult to look at regulations abroad and say we can bring those in here, right? And so what that implies is there is going to be a fair amount of conflict. But the good news is there is a listening regulator who keeps changing, and adopting new practices to accommodate this transformation. Please understand, it's a very difficult process. There's a lot of lobby groups who don't want that change, and so it takes a lot to have the wherewithal and the foresight to make those changes. So I think all in all, but largely from a governance perspective, I'm not a big believer that the government can basically allow things to happen. I fundamentally don't believe the government can make things happen, especially in disruptive pieces, etc. Because that's not the role of the government. The role of the government is stepping aside and kind of letting it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaiya. I'd like to take the discussion to Justice Pant. So, Mr. Dhaiya has raised an important point about the governance, and related to governance is, I would say, state capacity. I mean, despite the talk of maximum government, etc., which we have, India does not have enough personnel. The remnants of a licensed Raj are still flourishing, some people say. The political scientist Milan Vaishnav, I remember reading, he described the process itself as a punishment in India. The bureaucracy is vulnerable because of declining levels of human capital. There is not enough people in the judiciary. So, how can we build state capacity in India? When I say state capacity, all three arms of the government, legislature, executive, and judiciary. If we have to look forward to an aspirational future.
Thank you for inviting me. Firstly, I may make it clear that I am not a man from the economic field. As you mentioned that, as you know that we have a distributed system of governance where the legislature makes the law and the executive implements it, and the judiciary has a power to punish for violation of law. Traditional role of judiciary has been to decide the rights and liabilities of the parties, but now we see at times that the judiciary playing a wider role. However, in that process, it appears that the judiciary is unable to see its shortcomings, and due to that reason, we see that there is no speedy disposal of cases here, and the cases are lying for many years together. Many investors do not come forward to invest money in India because of the slow judicial system. With the help of technology, we must try to remove the stigma of being slow judicial system. In 2013, I had been to Singapore, and for 6 days I saw their working. The first thing I noticed is this, that in Singapore, for every plaintiff, it is necessary to go to mediation center before filing any suit, so that only genuine suits are filed in the courts. Number one. Secondly, thing I saw there was that there was no adjournment of cases. I witnessed it that a witness was lying in a hospital bed, and she was making statement in court through video conferencing. Lawyers were in the court, judge was in the court, the witness was in the hospital, and through video conferencing, the statement was being recorded, questions being asked from the court. Through gadget, the question was being translated into Tamil. The answer was given in Tamil, was being converted in, through gadget, was getting translated into English, but there was no adjournment, statement was going on. And not only this, I saw in one court where the charge was framed, accused was in jail, through video conferencing, he was answering the charge, and there was separate room for consultation of his lawyer with the accused in jail. That was a confidential communication for, in that room. Not only that, I saw in petty cases of fine, etc., there were kiosks outside the Singapore courts where the accused can apply for confession, and when the judge proposes the punishment and public prosecutor doesn't oppose it, there was a facility for the accused to make payment at the kiosk. He need not to go to the court at all. So, with the help of technology, Singapore has made their system so speedy that I was told there that many companies outside Singapore are entering into agreement, making an arbitration clause in their, they're putting an arbitration clause in their agreement, in which it was provided that the dispute between such companies, though outside Singapore, will be subject to the jurisdiction of the Singapore Arbitral Tribunal. So that is how, we have to, if we want to make more people to invest in India, and if we want to make our country more robust economy, we will have to bring changes in the judicial system also. And I have heard, I don't know, but I had never been to China, but I have read in one of the articles that in one of the cities in China, the intellectual property right cases, particularly the trademark cases, are being decided through artificial intelligence without human judge. So these kinds of, if we will have to make some changes in our practices, in our laws, so that we may meet the new challenges in India and keep a pace with the new changing times. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Justice Pant. That was an interesting insight. I would like to, ask Mr. Bagla now. I'll come to you in a bit, Mr. Chaturvedi. Mr. Bagla, this question of state capacity, is technology going to be the way to build state capacity? I mean, like we have had landmark reforms like the insolvency and bankruptcy court, for example, but we don't have enough benches at the NCLT, and there are a lot of delays. So how do we address this problem of state capacity?
So frankly, if you ask me, 2 or 3 points, Ravi. The first is, whenever you are at an inflection point in history, there are stories of the past and there are stories of the future. You will be what you adopt. So if you look at the stories of the future, which you've already started seeing happening, you will see that that is what you will become going forward. And That is where I must give full credit to Justice Pant and his entire team. You're seeing how fast digitization and technology is being adopted even in the courts. For example, we've had over now about 70 to 80 lakh cases which have already been digitized. Now, the interesting element which they found in those cases is, and especially cases where you require a formula, to come to some kind of a solution on that one, that the kind of interesting, I can't call it verdicts, but the decisions coming out of the system itself, the digitized system, have been at par with the ones when you look at it on how the judiciary has given it in physical terms. So frankly, going forward, not just the number of courts, etc., which are being increased tremendously, but also you will see the adoption of technology. And what has happened now with the lockdown, the adoption of this technology and the adaptation to this technology is now working on a huge fast track basis. Justice would bear me out that now you have a large number of these people who are more comfortable on having online stuff. The entire wastage of time, etc., is becoming much easier. So to my mind, the biggest change which is going to be a part of that inflection point, which I speak of, Ravi, is going to be the digitization of India. Can I take a minute on that, Ravi, with your permission? You see, we are about 730 million people on the net today. Every second, 3 new people are joining the net in India, 2 from a village. We are already about close to 50% of my net people are from the village. Now, by 2025, 26, I will be 1 billion people on the net, 1 billion people with a mobile, 1 billion people with a bank account, and 1 billion people with a unique identity number. Just think of that power of that India stack. And we had Mr. Yasheesh was there with us just now. Let me just take you back on the startup bit and just show you how it has changed the entire world so fast. Please remember, we are one of the youngest democracies on the planet. We may be an ancient civilization. So I think at times we start expecting too much of ourselves. So we're just about 75 odd years old. Now, let me take you back to that, especially on the startup world. Our startup started in January 2016 in a constructive manner. That is when the Honorable Prime Minister launched Startup India. That means what? We are just about 60 months from that, Ravi? 60 months? Yasheesh, you would agree with me? 60 months from the day we started Startup India. Let's look at our position in the world. I'm number 3 in the world in number of unicorns, number 2 in the world in number of startups, and number 1 in the world with new startups adding every day. In fact, even during the lockdown, I've added a unicorn every month. And one of the best things for me, which has been most satisfying, we have over 640,000 or 739,000, 740 districts in India, sorry, right? About 739 districts in India. Today, in a startup form, startups which are registered with me as Startup India, in over 600 districts of India, I have a registered startup today. What does that bring me to? The new India, which is going to emerge out of this virus, is going to be bottom up. It would have moved beyond the 10, 12 big centers to the smaller towns and cities in India. And, there are some amazing stories which keep coming up on the startup world. Maybe I'll come back to it once you have asked somebody else a question, but do remind me to tell you 1 or 2 of the new startup stories, which are the stories of New India.
Thank you, Mr. Bagla. Now I'll go to Mr. Chaturvedi. See, from what we have heard so far, Mr. Dhaiya was talking about the exceptional talent in India, and Mr. Bagla was talking about opportunities and about the youth and the entrepreneurial zeal. But see, one of the biggest things which economists are talking about is, will this demographic dividend turn into a demographic curse? Your sector, Mr. Chaturvedi, for example, but when I say your sector, I broadly mean the manufacturing sector. It was supposed to be the one, which would absorb this, young and talented workforce, but things have not happened, as expected. So, what is your view on the job situation and on this demographic dividend?
Difficult to comment on that. Let me first tell you that I'm no economist, and it's always a pleasure to interact with the young and future CEOs and COOs. Let me tell you one experience which we've had during the pandemic. we feel that the Indian bureaucracy comes into action when there is a national calamity. In fact, the amount of proactive interactions we had with the Indian bureaucracy just to maintain the supply chain of essential commodities like edible oils and sugar. I happen to be associated with edible oils and sugar as well. That kind of interaction, if we see on a regular basis, I think transformation of India is not far, and it is already happening. And coming to that ease of doing business, which we've been talking about, and which the international players always fear, I think that is one area where India needs to do something drastically. We need to get out of that Inspector Raj scenario, where an inspector can come and haul up the chairman of the company at the drop of the hat. This is where probably all our reforms fail. So for me, the crux would be the reforms are wonderful, and I see no reason why India should not become a 10 trillion economy by the year 2030. But we need to be very clear how we go about it and how we deliver things. I think we are on a right track. I am associated with the soybean, with the edible oil and the sugar sector. I find that the government action on this front has been very good. And they've been very, very proactive. In fact, I also happen to be the chairman or president of an association which represents the edible oil industry of the country. The amount of interaction which we've had with the government during the pandemic and online, I've never had in the last 5-7 years. So there's a lot of interaction with the government. So they are actually encouraging the private sector to come and tell them where they could possibly go wrong. And that has possibly helped India maintain its supply chain even during the pandemic. And our manufacturing just did not suffer during the pandemic. And we are again back to square one as far as the COVID is concerned. So I think we are on the right track. One point which I just wanted to put across was on the reforms front. India has had Essential Commodities Act, which has been actually kind of a, you could say, something which was hampering the progress of our agriculture over the years. This government has had the guts to actually withdraw that. And that is something which will open up the sector big time, because it was actually against the poor farmers. So I think we are on the right track. And coming to your point of whether jobs will open up or we will have more jobs, I'm not too sure about that, because with all this digitization taking place, and in fact, you'll be surprised, my headquarters is Bombay, and I've only visited Bombay in the last 1.5 years, only twice. So a large company is being run online. So that would probably result in job losses going forward. I'm not too gung-ho as far as jobs at the ground level is concerned, but other jobs or other fields might actually open up. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi. Mr. Dhaiya, would you like to weigh in on the same question on how we can prevent the demographic dividend from turning into a demographic curse? I mean, we have seen automation, AI, machine learning, all those things happening, but how do you keep a young population engaged?
Yeah, so see, I don't believe uh, technology will take away jobs. Technology will add to different opportunities. Let me give some very simple examples. Before Uber or Ola came into India, we had taxi drivers, and we also, you know what happened once they came in. The number of taxi drivers grew about 10x, and the availability to consumers grew multifold. I think If you look at an organization like ours, there's about 13,000 employees. You do need human beings, and you do need employees. It's just they may do a slightly different role. They may appear, of course, overall, as specialization keeps improving, we keep utilizing multiple services from different people. And I think those services keep evolving. But I do not believe the human race is a very special race. I don't think we are headed towards a situation where machines run everything and we don't do anything. That is unlikely, is where I would leave it. I think in terms of demographic dividend, we of course have a massive opportunity compared to anybody else in the world. We are the youngest large economy. We have this, as this population grows, it lends to lots and lots of opportunities. If I look at high consumption people earning as a family more than 5 lakh rupees per year, that's about 6 crore families in India today. In 10 years' time, that's going to be 150 crore families. That's a huge transformation. And at that stage, they enter fairly organized economy. So I think, and I agree with Deepak sir, that a lot of the innovations you would see in India would be grounds up. They would be first time in India, because India deserves different solutions from what the West may have.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Dhaiya. Now I'd like to shift the topic slightly, because the panel as a whole seems to be arriving at a consensus that, there are going to be lots of opportunities, 10 trillion economy by 2030 or 2032, whatever it is, we are there. The Indian economy is an immovable force, to put it in one sense. But from the point of view of society and politics, Justice Pant, recently, these Freedom House and VDEM Institute, for example, they downgraded India from the world's largest democracy to an electoral autocracy, citing muzzling of the media and overuse of defamation and sedition laws. India is not alone. I think Brazil, Turkey, and the United States are also, they have also been downgraded and being called electoral autocracy. So, do you think that this, how do I put it? Let's say, the downgrade of India, that it is no longer as much as a democracy as what we wish for. Will it be detrimental to India's diversity in the long run and prevent it from fulfilling this promise of economic growth and development?
I think, you see, the soul of the democracy is the through elections, the government has to be chosen. And that's what is happening in India. And that's under the constitutional provisions of the law. And we have an electoral system, we have a democracy, and the government is elected by the through adult franchise. So as far as the elected government is concerned, that is there, and that's the soul of the democracy. So merely, it cannot be downgraded for the reason that some of the people think that particular institution has been downgraded. We can't, with the same system, the judges were being appointed 30 years back. With the same system, judges are being appointed now. So how can it be said that it is being downgraded? I don't know how this assessment was made, because there might be certain organization who might have voted it like that, but I am unable to agree with that. Whether it is election commission, the process is the same, everything is the same. So now, if it is not convenient to somebody and they think that it is being downgraded in their, I don't think that everybody thinks like that. But we shouldn't be bothered about it, because so long as the democracy is the soul, we must have a democratic government. And if the government is chosen by the people, and the government should be allowed to work. As far as the constitutional bodies like Supreme Court or the High Courts or the other institutions, democratic institutions are concerned, in my opinion, I don't find any such reason to say that they have been downgraded, because the
Fair
laws
enough.
electing them are the same, the procedure electing them is the same, and nothing has changed in fact. And
Fair
only
enough,
because
Justice
some judgments happen to be, only because some judgment happen to have gone in favor of the government doesn't mean that the institution has gone down. It's not the
Yeah, but let me just give one example. Sorry to interrupt you here. See, for example, the Supreme Court has
Ravi,
clearly
sorry
said,
to bother. I'm not feeling well at all. I'll have to drop off. I'm really sorry about that.
okay,
Yeah,
all right,
I'm sorry
thank,
about that.
thank
I'm
you.
just not feeling well.
Okay.
Apologies. Apologies. Yeah.
So, Justice, sorry.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, the Supreme Court has clearly said that bail should be the norm in most cases, but the lower courts are routinely denying bail. Then there are, you know, some sections of the media, of people saying that, you know, the UAPA Act is being misused. So I think these are a couple of examples why people are saying that, you know, we are headed towards the direction of an electoral autocracy.
You
So,
see, as to the bail, I may say that there are two kinds of offenses. One is the bailable and another is the non-bail. In the bailable offense, accused has a right to get bail. The moment he is arrested, he is entitled to be released on bail on furnishing certain bonds, etc., for his appearance. Now, if it is a non-bailable offense, then the discretion lies with the court whether to grant bail or not to grant the bail. Now, there are certain norms and judicial norms under which we decide whether it should be the person arrested should be granted bail or not. Now, for deciding it, we consider a lot of things. Say illness of the person, or whether he's a woman, or at times whether he's a child, or that is not a or some other suffering from an ailment, or the gravity of the. If it is a case of murder, then we have to see it whether he is a named person or not, whether the eyewitnesses were there or not. So it depends on thousands circumstances on which we have to decide whether this is a fit case for bail or not. And in a particular case may be fit for bail by the higher court, but may not be fit to be granted bail by the trial court or the magistrate court, because at that time investigation is still at a preliminary stage and the interrogation, more and more interrogation is required at that stage. So to say merely for the reason that bail of certain people is not granted doesn't mean that the system has been downgraded, or it has been. You see, the judges, the subordinate court judges supposing government, some subordinate court judge has not granted bail to some person. How the government has influence over him? Government has no influence, because under Article 235 of Constitution of India, high courts have administrative control over the judicial officer, not the government. So he is not afraid of the government. How can you say that the government has brought down these institutions down? It is on the merits of each case.
no, absolutely, sir. It is not about the government. I mean, we are talking, when we say democracy, we are talking about all arms of the government, and judiciary is, you know, one arm, along with legislature also. So from that point of view, anyway, I think let's move on a little bit. In the sense, so okay, fine. Let's keep the argument on democracy aside. But what about social and income inequality? That still is a big issue in India, and it continues to remain so. Because of the pandemic recently, I think Pew Research said that 32 million people have dropped out of the middle class. Mr. Chaturvedi, coming to you, I mean, how big do you think this is going to be a problem in India achieving its, this potential?
What we are seeing at the ground level is that the MSMEs and the small businesses are seriously in trouble. As far as the large manufacturing companies or large trading companies they are concerned, they're all doing quite well, and in fact they're doing better than what they were possibly doing earlier. But as far as the MSME and the smaller guys are concerned, that is a disaster. And with the recurrence of COVID back, things are actually going from bad to worse. But the silver lining in all this is that after a long time, we feel agriculture is going to attain center stage. And in fact, with the commodity prices worldwide moving up, we feel that the next growth chapter from India, or rather in India, would probably be written by the rural sector. And with all this farmers' agitation and all, it has brought agriculture in the forefront of all the policy making. And now you would see probably a lot of action on that front. And coupled with very high commodity prices, and the commodity boom is now well on the way, so I think the agriculture sector 4% growth should not be a problem, and that would probably indirectly ease the issue of employment. Possibly, rural areas would generate more employment than the urban centers. This is our take.
Mr. Bagla, do you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. Completely agree with Atul on this one and all. But let me, if you give me a minute, Ravi, let me just give a few points. One is, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, when you're at an inflection point, you become the stories which you are. Ravi, I think the time has come that we've got to stop being skeptics and pessimists. And I think even, for example, our entire discussion here, there is a bright future ahead. And I'll give you a very interesting instance. Last January, when we were in Davos, we were having a roundtable with one of the top world's 18 investors, and a minister from India was there. And one of the investors, one of the big pension fund investors, said that he's going to be doing a 2.5x of his investment exposure to India. That means he's going to more than double his expansion in over 24 months. And another investor asked him why. Very interesting. He said, every tomorrow of India is better than today. And I think that sums it up extremely well. When Atul says that even during the most unprecedented lockdown in human history, not just in India, but across the world, India kept itself open to keep its dependence, or the world's dependence, on its shoulders right and alive. We sent medicines to 123 countries. We are sending them vaccines. We kept ourselves open. Please remember, on the 31st of March this year, I did not have a single PPE in India. We were scurrying around the globe trying to buy them, and you remember the entire world was locked. On 15th of July, I had over a run rate of over 1 million PPEs a day in India. My MSMEs got together, pivoted their business models, changed them around, brought in innovation, and created ventilators, PPEs, which are now being exported across the globe. That is the strength of my 65 million MSMEs of India, their frugal innovation. So when you ask me that, is there a skepticism about India making it? Not at all. I think it's time we move beyond that narrative. I also think it's time we move beyond the narrative that we require certificates from global agencies to tell us what my rating is. I don't require it any longer. I think it's well established already. You asked me right in the beginning that we are going to be hurt. Of course we are going to be hurt. This is the first time in the past 200 years you've had a demand and a supply shock hit you at the same time, and hit the entire universe at the same time. And yet, look at it, you are emerging out of it as the fastest growing economy on the planet again. 12.5% for the next 12 months, and another 7 to 8% for the following 12 months. The highest again in the world. How is that happening, Ravi? If that strength is not there, and you keep bringing in the point of poverty, of course it is there. I've got 1.3 billion people, but let me tell you what is happening with that digitization. And I explained to you that I have over 700 million already on the net, and I'm going to be having over 1 billion on the net in the next 24 months. Let me tell you what that is going to bring. The first thing it will become is democratization of opportunity, democratization of the sharing of what comes out of growth of a country and its economy. Democratization of access to education, to healthcare, to everything. Each of my population is going to become a human resource. And please remember, there is a clear statistic that by 2045, 90% of my human resource is going to be in the middle class bracket. By 2045, that's not even far away, Ravi. And let me end up with one example, which is what I just shared this platform the other few weeks ago with this young 19-year-old boy called Rohit Kashyap. He comes from Sitamhari in Bihar. You know, it's one of the more backward districts which we have in the country. You know, when Rohit finished his school and college, what did he do? He started a startup. It's called Maitri Consultants. Please have a look at it. And I would request each of your students to have a look at it. And you know what Matri Consultants does? It helps startups in and around his village and cities to connect them to the world and to help them grow. And they've already raised 40 crores for those startups. This is a story of New India, Ravi. This is where the New India is coming in from each of my small towns and villages, 640,000 of those. The narrative has changed, Ravi. It is time that you and I start adopting that new narrative and see where this India is headed now. You were talking of the ease of doing business. You know, when we moved from a position of 140s to 64, what has gone on at the backside of it? My team was a part of it, which was working towards that ease of doing business. We did over 8,000 policy interventions together in the state and the central government. And when you're talking of a change of mindset of the government of India, let me explain to you, Invest India is a startup of the government of India. I started this entity in 2015. Today, it is rated as #1 in the world by the UN out of 188 countries. I'm not trying to show off on it, but I'm just trying to tell you how fast India is changing. And let me tell you more importantly, it has now got, it's the only 100% government funded agency which has been ranked as the best place to work. Remember that global ranking, which is based on diversity, merit, equity. This is how the entities of New India are coming up.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Bagla. See, nobody is disputing in on that. So my only point was, is growth without, increasing equality meaningful?
But that is not a point, Ravi. Look at the moment you see where
No,
growth is coming in from. Let me complete, Ravi. The moment you see where this growth is coming from, you see it is becoming more and more egalitarian. We have Justice Pant telling us how he's working on the justice side of it. You have Atul telling you how the MSMEs are taking over. The strength of India was its MSMEs. It's only in 2000 that you got to be known for your technology and IT, which is what the world started recognizing you for. I have 65 million of those MSMEs. And as he rightfully said, my agriculture, my entire food production, my diversity of income at the lowest level is going up immensely. And let me tell you how I see 2030 emerging of India. What I see as the biggest point of emerging of 2030, politically, I see power, a greater level of autonomy and power going to the small self-help groups in villages, the panchayats, or the municipal corporations. They're becoming more and more active. On the social side, this work from home means work from anywhere. That means people will start staying close to where their families are in those small towns and villages. You'll have the family unit coming back together. Economically, as I already explained to you, this engine of growth is going to move beyond these 10, 12 urban centers to the small towns and cities. And as Atul and I both agree with it, we see a new India emerging bottom up. That automatically explains to you where the income distribution is going to move to. Sorry, back to you, Ravi.
Yeah, I think it's time to take some questions from the audience. They've been waiting patiently. Question to Mr. Chaturvedi. How can we guarantee that the rural sector flourishes in the coming years while adapting to ongoing technological advancements?
In fact, one of our greatest desires is that technology also comes into agriculture. More crop per drop just does not remain only a catchy slogan. And this is what is actually happening. In fact, we would be more than keen and more than excited to have genetically modified technology, also GMO, coming into the country. And I think the opposition to that is also easing off a bit. And with digitization also taking place, that ease of the dissemination of information to the farmers, and also they're connecting to the consumer, all these things are bound to increase their income levels. And once you have biotechnology and other things coming into play, and which it has already started, India's productivity is bound to go up. Our tragedy has been that whether it's oilseed or whether it's any other agri commodity, our average productivity level is only about 40 to 50% of the world's average. This is where the doubling of the income is bound to happen with all the technological and these interventions. And this is where I'm sure things are moving in the right direction. And that is going to be the big game changer, not the doubling of the price. Doubling of the produce is going to be the real game changer as far as India is concerned. And that is what we are seeing. And I think the opposition to GM, and we've been advocating, that is also probably easing off a bit. And I won't be too surprised if by 2030, Indian agriculture, which currently is contributing only about 17% to our GDP, might start contributing anything between 25 to 30%.
What about manufacturing?
Manufacturing sector is bound to grow. If agriculture grows, there's no reason why manufacturing doesn't grow. And with the changing in the consumer profile, what we are also seeing is that agriculture in the country will probably move more and more up the value chain. Possibly the wheat rice cycle might give way to more fruits and vegetables and meat and poultry and all that, and dairy. So that would actually go to augment their income. And wheat and rice alone is not going to help our country, because our consumption of these commodities is actually coming down. As the income levels and the consumer profile is changing, what we are seeing is that people now prefer more meat, more proteins. And one more thing which I thought we'll share, that the definition of food security in the country, we feel going forward, is bound to change, and it might actually become nutritional security. Food security we've had in the 60s and 70s, and we've grown beyond that. And if you look at your crop numbers, we are possibly second to none as far as our numbers are concerned. And you'll be surprised, India has probably one of the world's biggest arable land in the country. If only we can double our production and productivity, that is going to be a big, big game changer. And that is bound to bring in more and more rural richness. And what we are seeing in edible oil and even in sugar is the aspiration levels in the rural sector is much higher. I would not be surprised that the rural sector starts contributing about 55 to 60% of the FMCG sales going forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi. Question for Justice Pant. The students want to know how, in your view, we can make the judicial system more efficient and faster, apart from technology. Whose example you gave?
Yeah, of course, the work culture is necessarily lacking in some of the courts. Lawyers going off and on strike on flimsy grounds in the district courts. That's one of the major factors that will have to be controlled, because with the introduction of Advocates Act 1961, now there is no control of the courts over the advocates. So in the district courts, mostly in UP, I have seen it, because I have worked for 41 years in the judicial service, right from. So I saw lawyers used to go on strike on flimsy grounds. Now, I mean, their strike, if they like, they will come. Otherwise, they will say, we are not coming to the court. Now, the cases used to get adjourned number of times. You will have to check the strikes of the lawyers in the district courts, number one. Number two, the higher courts must admit only those cases which they feel they will be able to dispose it of within a reasonable time. Supposing government, now what happens is this, now if higher courts start granting stay orders liberally, what happens is the district court trial in the district court gets held up. And with those stay orders, for 20 years, for 10 years, the suit or the criminal trial is lying stayed because of the stay from the higher courts. So the higher court should grant stay order in the rare cases or very, very genuine cases. Otherwise, this main cause of the second main cause for this pendency for many years is because of the stay orders granted by the higher courts, which are not disposed of by the high courts on time. So I know in some of the high courts, criminal appeals are being, particularly one high court, I can say, I'm not naming it, but after 20, 30 years, the criminal appeal is coming up for the hearing. So by then, either the accused will have served the sentence, or if he is granted bail, he must have either died or something. In many cases in criminal appeal get abated because the accused was on bail and he has died. After 30 years, he must have. So these are some of the factors which we can, under the even if the law is not changed, by developing the work culture in the judiciary, we can, to a large extent, control the pendency of cases, dispose of speedily. But I think with the changing of the times, once again, I will repeat that we will have to take help of the technology, as I pointed out earlier, that we will have to go for the new methods of digitalization and all these. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thanks. I think we just have 2 minutes. So I'd like
Thank
to
you.
wind up by asking all of you to gaze into your crystal balls and tell me in 20 seconds each, what is the one change which you predict seeing over the next decade, or the one change which you wish will happen over the next decade? I will start with Mr. Chaturvedi.
My take is that with the continued thrust on renewable energy, like solar, ethanol, and wind, our cities would be much more livable in terms of pollution. And I must congratulate this government on their thrust on the ethanol, which is from our sugar sector. And that is going to be a big game changer going forward. We feel by 2030, India would actually start using flexi cars, and the blending of ethanol into petrol might actually go beyond 20%, which will possibly go to reduce the carbon footprints in this country. And the other point which I thought I'll put across is, as we go up the value chain, we feel that the processed food sector would also grow from the current level of about 10%. We might start seeing something like 25 to 30% of our agricultural produce getting processed and value added.
Thank you. Justice Pant?
I have no comments. Everything is, we will have, if we take right steps, and I hope that things will improve in the coming days. And by 2030, we will have a better India and better, whether it is in the field of economy or the judiciary. I hope that there will be betterment.
Thank you, Justice Pant. We'll end with Mr. Bagla.
Thank you, Ravi. For me, I think it's very clear. 2030 will be the top 3 economies on the planet. India will be a different place to be in. And we have a new generation already, which is far more optimistic, which is far more open, and is taking on the onus of making it happen, not blaming others for not letting it happen. That is bringing this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bagla. Thank you, Mr. Chaturvedi. Thank you, Justice Pant and the students of SRCC. I hope this was of some use to all of you. Signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being a part of this panel. I'm sure everybody who is present here has taken a lot back from this panel. Thank you, Ravi Krishnan sir, for moderating the entire panel. It was done smoothly. Okay, thank you, sir. We also thank Moneycontrol for helping us organize this panel.
Okay, I just have to make an announcement. The link that Mr. Bindra was talking about the course has been added in the chat box. Anyone who wants to join in can get the link from that, from the chat box only.
Amrita.
Yeah.
1 second, can you repeat what you were saying?
I just have to make an announcement that the link that Mr. Bindra gave for the free course that he's offering is in the chat box given, and people can click on that, and they can get the link. Thank you.